Do you ever feel like you're giving your students everything, but you're actually wondering if they're learning less? Sometimes we think in education, more is better, and we overload students with slides and handouts and links and reference lists. But what if actually more teaching was blocking learning? Let's talk about cognitive load theory, where actually the saying is, less is more. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Dr. Cara Bedzina. I'm a GP, medical educator, and PhD fellow. And these videos are dedicated to providing medical education tips and tricks for the busy healthcare professional. In this video, we're going to talk about cognitive load theory. As educators, we often overload students in the name of being thorough. Slide after slide, handout after handout, hour after hour. Some part of it is we're worried that we're not good enough with what we provide. And there's this cycle where teachers feel better because they're giving more, and students feel better because they think, oh, the more information I come across, the more I'll learn. Sadly, that isn't really the case. And cognitive load theory shows us that actually we need to be mindful of what we're teaching and how we're teaching it. So what is cognitive load theory and why does it matter to learners? What I'd like you to imagine just now is that you've got a kitchen stove with 4 burners. And on those 4 burners, I want you to make 8 different meals. What would happen? Well, let me tell you, there'd be a lot of mess. Cognitive load theory is about learning to prioritize and manage what you're putting on the kitchen stove. Cognitive load theory reminds us that learners have limited bandwidths. It's based on this theory that our working memory, that's the memory that we use to help engage with and deal with new information, has finite capacity. And it's also based on the idea that in order for you to learn something, it needs to move from working memory to long-term memory. Now what happens is if we overload the working memory, i.e. give it way too much information, not all that information is going to get to long-term memory, and the rest of it is just going to be lost or forgotten. What ends up happening is that the student ends up feeling really overwhelmed. So when we read about cognitive load theory, it's talked about in 3 different ways. What I'm going to do is focus on the 3 different ways and then talk about different strategies you could use to maximize those different elements of the theory. What I want to say is that this video is not intended to be comprehensive, but more to introduce you to some terms and ideas so you can do some reading on your own. First, there's intrinsic load. This is about the natural or intrinsic complexity of the task at hand, or the information that we need to learn. We also, secondly, talk about extrinsic load or extraneous load. And this, rather than it being about the complexity of the information, rather focuses on how the information is presented. And finally, the 3rd term we use is germane load. This is the good type of cognitive load that is actually necessary in order for learning to happen. There are different ways that we can consider these types of cognitive load to adapt our teaching to make it easier. So intrinsic load. If we were going to be meta about this, cognitive load theory is actually quite a vast and complex topic. And one of the ways that we can talk about it is by breaking it into smaller chunks. And that means introducing the topic at hand and introducing the different terms that are used in the topic. So one of the ways that we can be cognizant of and take into consideration intrinsic load in our teaching is be mindful of the fact that there's only so much information that can be taken in all at once. And making sure we break down complex ideas into small manageable chunks is really quite important. So in the case of learning on clinical placements, this means with a patient encounter, choosing to focus on 1 or 2 elements of the encounter and ensuring that the students have an expectation of where the learning is going to be focused. So that's one example. If we talk about extrinsic load, this is a lot about how we package the learning and can have a lot to do with instructional design. So when we're giving a presentation, this means using as few words as possible on the slide. So many times have I sat in lectures given by very accomplished and experienced clinicians where there's slide after slide after slide of paragraphs and text, and you spend wondering if you should be reading the text or listening to the person, and actually you find it really difficult to follow. It's so overwhelming. So one of the ways that we can adapt our extrinsic load is being mindful of our teaching material. The main point of this video is there is an educational theory called cognitive load theory. It was developed by John Sweller, an educational psychologist. The basis of the theory is that our working memory, that's important in learning new information and learning concepts, has a finite capacity. And whenever we're engaging in education with learners, resident doctors, nurse trainees, etc., we need to be aware of this. And that means that we need to take steps to make sure that we're transmitting information in small, bite-sized chunks, and we're aware of the fact that there's only so much that a student can learn. We can talk about it more detail in another video, but what do you think? Have I convinced you to read more about cognitive load theory? Or was it enough to know that learning should not be an all-you-can-eat buffet? If you're interested in more MedEd videos, check out one of my other videos where I talk about feedback, small group learning, and the like. If you've got a question about cognitive load theory or something you'd like to explore, pop it in the comments below. Otherwise, if you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. I will see you later. Ciao!